I would go visit people in the hospital, and it would freak them out and their family because the priest only went.
Right,
priest only went for last rites.
Right. Yeah.
You know, so
extreme unction. Yeah.
I thought I just had a gallbladder removed. I'm confused.
Welcome to Michael Easley in Context, sort of. Today we have Pastor Mike Glenn and Pastor Tim Harlow, and we're still trying to figure out what we're going to be called. But for now, we're using the inContext
platform. We have
platform.
lots of suggestions. All our friends, all of our friends are making really good suggestions on what we should call
Larry, Moe, and Curly.
Yeah.
And all sorts. So anyway, welcome to the broadcast. And we have a hope and an effort here that is three pastors. We all had 40-some plus years in ministry, how we can encourage other people as well as give a little insight and internal glimpse on what it was like to be a pastor in ministry. So welcome, Michael and Tim, and why don't you kick us off this morning?
Always good.
Brother Glenn?
Oh, that's right. It's my turn to bring the questions.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. First question. What is the greatest truth of Christianity you could never get your church to believe?
Ooh, you could have given us a little heads up on that.
I would say...
What is the one of those key truths, foundational truths of our faith that our people, for whatever reason, just never clicked on?
For me, it's making disciples. I think the church programs and activities were important. They were good. They were a lot of, infrastructure runs the thing. And I think to get, Christ's mandate to make disciples of all ethnos, I think that got lost in the shuffle. Now, it did happen in pockets.
Right.
There were faithful people doing it, and I tried to do it. Maybe there's some that would say, we were discipled. I think in the main, I don't know if that gets to the heart of your question, but that's an area I've always felt that I failed in leading people to say, this is about making disciples, not programs and numbers and budgets and buildings. And ministry happens in those contexts.
Everything has to be justified by the reality that it makes disciples.
And if that's the litmus, a lot of failure.
Right.
A lot of failure. And we have to own that as leaders.
Yeah, but that was going to be my follow-up question. When did you see that working well? Is it because of the size of the organizations that we led, or you know what I mean? Like there's a big push to, and I don't blame it, to go back to a smaller context,
House church,
and we all did, big crowd things. Was that it? Because I've seen a lot of small churches, been a part of a lot of small churches that didn't make any disciples. So where did you see it? Where did you see it working?
Well, my wife
other than Acts 2.
Well, yeah. My wife and I did a marriage mentor program, and that was born out of seeing these starter marriages, these young couples that get married and quit 2-3 years in, no kids. And we had 3 of them at the church in D.C. that failed, and I went home mad. And I said to Cindy, the pre-marriage ain't working.
No.
And so we sketched out on a piece of paper in 10 minutes a 2-year program. And we had them in our home every Sunday night for 2 years. And the first group was a little unwieldy. I think we had 14 couples. And then we cycle them out. It was exhausting. It was time-consuming. I chased each man individually for lunches and whatnot. Cindy chased the women as she could get with them. And we did many of those groups, and I would say that was the closest thing. And then I could stand up and say,
"Oh, I agree.
We're trying to make disciples. We're not perfect. We're not the only mentors in the world, but we're trying." And I think there's a handful.
But it also, that other half of the preparation of the sermon of the scriptural exegesis and the congregational exegesis, so you could stand up and say with some authority, "This is what we talk about,
right?
And this is what the Bible informs us on this stuff."
Well, anything we talk about from the pulpit, that's the megaphone, right? If you're talking about the gospel or vision or raising money or building a church, a school, that you have the bully pulpit. And if you're talking about discipleship and people you're trying to encourage and mentor, it can. Anyway, I digress, but I think that was, to answer your question, Tim, I think we did see some success, I use that word carefully, and some of those folks are really doing well. We have some that are elders in churches and leading big ministries and marriage groups around the country, and we're grateful. But I think in the main, I still feel like prayer and discipleship were the two that we could have always done better.
I'll agree with that. I'll answer the question myself, but I'll agree with that. There's a lot of talk about, the church board and how does that work and how do you get the right elders and leaders and deacons and whatever around you. And I realized early on that I needed to develop my own. The ones I inherited were not going to be the ones that were going to take us where we needed. And so John Maxwell had that Joshua's Men program way back in the day, and I adopted that. And so, for the last 20 years, every one of the elders on our board had been through a year-long discipleship process with me. And that, and I like to tell the younger guys, I mean, you could just make it a crapshoot if you want and see what happens, but it'd be much better if you start right now developing those people that are going to make that happen. And of course, my wife and I were in a neighborhood small group, and I could talk about that as well. The problem is, that's us doing it, and maybe we can force the staff to do it to a certain degree, but replicating that like they seem to have done in the first century, it's just so hard to figure out, isn't it?
Yeah. Well,
we're paid to be good.
Yeah, we're paid
to do that.
Yeah, we are.
And our members bring corporate model leadership into the church.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So you have the pyramid with the sort of CEO at the top, the pastors at the top, and everybody serves upward to the pastor. The biblical model is reversed. The triangle comes and ultimately stands on Jesus.
All right.
But the weight of the church is on the pastor.
Yeah.
But Jesus' ministry, and I'm saying this. This is all stuff that I have finally figured out in the last
now
week.
That we're done.
Now that I'm done.
Yeah.
And what I would have, and there's a lot of anger and forgiveness, but you messed this up so bad. Jesus' model was he taught the multitudes, but he spent his time with the 12.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
I don't know of any pastor who does that. It's all about the Sunday morning experience and how much impact you can have. More corporate.
Yeah.
And that's when you address the masses, when you should be tipping your hat to that moment. But your time should be spent on those handful of leaders that you will disciple. And I think there are a lot of ways to fail at this. One of the ways that we fail is we don't ever send them out. Okay. We don't ever say, you can't come back to this group.
Right.
Or I'm going to go start another group. Y'all keep this one, and I'm going to go start another one.
Yeah.
We never force them to go out. Interesting thing, Jesus didn't give a plan to the disciples. Here's what you got to do. Now go figure it out.
Yeah.
But he modeled it.
He modeled it.
That's A.B. Bruce's whole book, The Training of the 12.
Right. Yeah. He modeled it. But when you go to the scripture and say, I need to figure out how church is set up, what is the structure of the church? There's very little teaching.
Ecclesiology.
The kind of people you put into leadership, there's a lot of talk about that. But there's no mention of pastor, board, body, what the body votes on, and everything. There's none of that. But the Bible seems to be saying, make it work in your context. But here are the things that always unite a church. But I wish I had figured out earlier. Leaders are potential leaders are born, but everybody has to be discipled into leadership.
Yeah.
And it's never the guy that the church points at. They always choose Saul.
Yes.
David's a little harder to find.
That's right. Yeah. That's a really good word.
I could never get people to understand that they are loved. And that may be because that's kind of the wound I carry. That I'm always out there. I was reading this morning where Jesus says in Luke, beware when people speak well of you. Well, and I wrote in the margin, that was my whole life goal. That was everything I wanted. And Jesus said that's the way you find a false prophet. Is you find the people that the world is blessing,
right?
And you say, that's the wrong That's the wrong
And you think of ministry platforms and pastors' conferences, and we parade the superheroes. Be like all these guys with huge ministries and books and satellites and big budgets. And when we were at Moody and had the pastors' conferences, I always sat in the audience with. I think I was a pastor for 24 years before I went to Chicago. And I'm sitting there going, we parade all these heroes. And what we're saying is I want to be like that person, successful like him. It's a tension.
And the most successful guy is a pastor of a small town where the factory shut down.
Exactly.
And
he's loving people.
The town lost 25% of its population, and he only lost 3% of his attendance. And you're going to write him off as having, the church isn't growing. That guy's doing some work.
You're right. And he's got no money to work with, and he took a cut in pay when all those people left and has no retirement plan. I mean, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Back to your point about not feeling loved, I have a group on Monday that we read books together. It's a WebEx like Zoom, about 9 guys. And somehow we got off on this. Why do we believe in salvation, eternal security? We know that when we die, we're going to go to heaven. Yeah. But we don't trust him for the day-to-day.
Yeah.
And the corollary was, the hardest truth was that God loves me.
Yeah. Yeah, see, that's the thing.
Yeah. How could he love me, the sinner that I am? What goes on between my brain and
I
chest?
don't even love me on most days.
That's probably good.
Well,
self-esteem's overrated.
Yeah.
But
how much effort did I put in? How much effort do my people and the people of this area put in to try to get people to like them, be impressed with them, when the foundational statement of the faith is you're loved? That question is answered.
Yeah.
And you live out of the abundance that the Father delights in.
And I think a lot of it's just our own. One of these guys in this group said when his granddaughter gets up in the morning and she runs to see him,
yeah,
there are 2 of the most delighted people on the planet.
That's right.
Yeah. Grandpa and that little granddaughter.
That's exactly right.
My
That's
grandkids
exactly
too,
right?
right?
Yeah.
When they hug,
man,
whatever you want. You want a car?
Yeah,
what kind of car?
right.
Yeah.
And he goes, that's the way God loves. And that image of God from my Catholicism, it was a hammer over my head.
Yeah.
You do wrong, And
well, Baptist, it was fire.
Fire?
Yeah. We didn't have the hammer. We had
the fire.
I think I'd rather be hit with a hammer than burned.
We had a bonfire standing right there behind, and you'd be thrown in at the end of the service.
I'll go with a slight. That was going to be mine, but I think it's grace. It's love, but I think it's grace. And again, I ministered in a 70% Catholic area where the hammer was it. So the problem with it is if you don't really understand grace, you become the judgmental Christian.
Right.
You become the person that's looking at everybody else because you don't really feel completely accepted.
Right.
So I literally had this conversation with a pastor recently where he had a woman come up to him and say, "How come you don't preach about sin?" And he said, "Well, today I preached about pride, and last week I preached about greed." And she literally said, "You know what I mean."
Wow.
Obviously not.
And he said, is
there a little pride behind that statement?
You mean, why don't I preach about other people's sin? Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah.
And, that's the attitude of not understanding grace. If I don't understand that I'm, the guy next to Jesus on the cross with no redemption in me whatsoever,
right.
then I'm going to look down at those other people. And I think it's a huge problem we've got in the 21st century church. I'm going to look down on those people because they do that sin. And I'm actually okay because I've got this list, which still goes back to works-oriented salvation.
Yeah. Well, one of the things we found out with addiction, and you guys know this, is that it's not just the person who's sick, but the whole system is sick.
Right.
And so when the one person starts trying to get well, try to get sober, the whole system has to get well. And the system doesn't want to do that. So they will actually try to destroy your sobriety rather than deal with their own stuff.
Yeah.
Now that we have stepped away from full-time responsibility at our congregation, what do you want to apologize to your church for?
Why do we let him ask the question?
I have no idea. I mean, he could have at least given us a heads up.
What do you want to stand up? I'll go first on this one.
Thank you.
I am ashamed of how much of my people's time I wasted by being the good carnival barker to get you to attend certain things that I knew at the time, and now I'm convinced make no eternal difference in the kingdom of God. And I guilted people into coming to this, and this has to be, because I was told, and you were all told, hey, if you're going to have a good church, you got to have an XYZ ministry. And if you don't have 200 people at your XYZ ministry, you're not ever going to be on a speaking tour. You're not ever going to be recognized. Yeah. So by George, I got 200 people at XYZ ministry, and it meant nothing. It meant nothing to them. It took them. We had a business guy come and help us structure our church, and he walked into my office one day and he said, "How good of friends are we?" I said, "Well," I said, "Well, I'm trusting right you a lot." And he said,
"We'll see after this."
He said, "All right, here's what I want to tell you. This church is the most anti-family organization in town.
It pulls everything."
Yeah. He said, "We want the parents here on Sunday night. We want the kids here on Wednesday night. We want the students here on Thursday night. The whole time you're telling them the parents have to disciple the children. When do you want them to do that? You're telling them to come to the building 24/7, and you guilt them that they're not really committed if they're not coming 24/7. You have a men's pancake breakfast.
Yeah.
Okay? Then you have a father come up to you and go, 'No, I won't be there. I take my daughters to breakfast every Saturday. I won't ever be at that.' All right, my first thing is, well, you can take your daughter. This men's breakfast, that's one of the questions Jesus is going to ask you. Did you go to the men's breakfast? I wish I had protected my people and told all these people with these big plans, no. I'll tell them about it, but I'm going to tell them, your most important thing is to be home.
Yeah.
With your wife, with your husband, with your children. That's where it happens. Now, we can come up here and have a big picnic and have some fun every now and then, but good. We wasted lifetimes. We preached to thousands almost, and we wasted thousands of man hours. And deluded them into thinking that they were doing something good, faithful.
Yeah,
and good.
that had something to do with their faith. Yeah,
I'm a good Christian because I go to everything.
Yeah.
Well, but it's not unlike the aforementioned topic of making disciples. So, I mean, think of Kairos when you had this ministry to young adults. Let's just say there were 1,000, a number, just 1,000. Let's say 800 fell into the trap or the rationale, I need to be there. What about those 200 that grew, Mike?
Yeah.
What about those, out of that, the 20 that went on and said, I think I want to do this full time.
Right.
And that's the part, the tension. I mean, when you asked the question, I don't have long enough to go through the whole roster of things I need to apologize for, but I also have to believe in the activities you did, bringing people to all these programs. A lot of people and you know as well as I do, there are people that are serving in the background that are never going to be up front people, but it was important for them to get there, to help, to be behind the scenes, whether it's cooking or cleaning or bringing along a young girl who had never been in your kitchen before. I mean, there are lots of tentacles to this.
Yeah.
And my daughter was one of the ones that got ministered to at Kairos. So I would, and I don't think, I went to Kairos several times while you had it, and she was at Belmont, and I didn't look around and see very many people that got guilted to coming on Tuesday night. So yeah, I mean, men's breakfast, I mean, there's still a point to it.
Right.
There's a balance to what, I mean, you're going to get up and say everybody needs to be in a group because everybody needs to be in a group.
Right.
You need that, one way or the other, but I don't know. You got something?
About 15. I'm trying to think like the most egregious one. And I think for my years in D.C., I was so focused on exposition. Now, let me qualify that. I still think exposition was my wiring and gifting and ministry, but I think sometimes it was to the exclusion of other things. And I would deliver a sermon that was worked on. I mean, it was not a 10-hour thing. It was a 30, 40-hour sweat sometimes to write that message to that audience. It was a different audience.
Oh, yeah.
And I felt like that was my job and my stewardship and my ministry to that audience. And maybe like the aforementioned analogy, a lot of that's true. But there was a sense, I used to go to see where these people worked, especially my elders. I'd go to the Pentagon. I'd go to the Walter Reed. I'd go over to Fort Belvoir. I'd go to the Naval Naval Observatory. I meet people. Show me where you work. That probably was more important than the 40 hours of sermon prep.
Oh yeah.
And I don't regret the 40 hours of sermon prep, but I think my ministry focus was more on, Michael, you were hired to be the expositor Bible teacher. And back to the way we look at the church hierarchically, when probably more life on life. And Hendricks had this comment, Howard Hendricks had this comment, ask yourself when you preach, what are you trying to do to these poor people? Because a lot of times I learned something cool and I want to tell you what I learned.
Yeah.
And people are entertained by that.
Yeah.
They're impressed by that. They write notes in a pad. And, my other friend, Dave Gibson, has his header, Sir, we would see Jesus. And those reminders of our own stuff we get, pulled into. I think in the main, that's it. I think I focused a lot of my hours were in the study. And I know pastors, that's what they believe we're going to do.
Right. One night I was working Saturday night. I was working on the sermon, trying to get it right. And there was one paragraph that just frustrated me.
Just one?
I had to key this. And I was just, and then I get into the martyrdom. Jesus, you're lucky to have me. I'm the only one who really cares about this. I'm the only. Everybody else is out on Saturday night. For me, I'm here. And the question came to me. Goes, why are you here? I said, well, this paragraph's not right. I got to get it right. And another question. There won't be 3 people tomorrow that know the difference.
That's right.
If that,
yeah.
And then I said, it's important to me. Okay.
Yeah.
Important to you.
Yeah.
But don't let it become demonic. See what I would.
Did you ever get in trouble for the paragraph, or did you get in trouble for the extemporaneous stuff?
Yeah, the stuff you just flippantly set off your head.
I never did that.
In the wrong moment, like, that cost me.
Can't wheel that one back.
But those of us who know you and love hanging around you, Michael, it is your knowledge of Scripture and all of that time that you spent there that we I want to say admire, but we count on you for that.
And I hear what you're saying. That's what I say. It's a tension to say that, because I felt like that was my gifting and wiring.
You love that.
But I did.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, would it have been? And I always loved hospital visitation.
Yeah.
I loved it. I never. I mean, you had to drive, in D.C. for an hour to get places, but it was important.
Sure.
I'll never forget. One elder was in the hospital. He's with the Lord now, buddy. Wonderful, wonderful man. And I went to see him. He was fighting cancer, and I went to see him in the hospital. And there were a bunch of people from his Sunday school class. We call them ABS, Adult Bible Fellowships. And I walked in there, and he looked around the room and goes, "Oh, I must be bad. The preacher's here." And he kind of admonished me, "Michael, you don't have to do this."
Yeah. It's not a good use of your time.
But you're my friend. I love you. You're my brother. You're an elder. I respect you. I mean, but you don't have to do this. Now, not everybody's going to respond that way.
Well, yeah.
But that's one of those.
And it's always the saints you really want to be around who respond.
Well, there's that.
Right. Yeah.
You do love me after all.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I had to learn that the hard way because, I would go visit people in the hospital and it would freak them out and their family because the priest only went.
Right.
Priest only went for last rites.
Right. Yeah.
So
Extreme unction.
I thought I just had a gallbladder removed. I'm confused.
Oh God! What
I learned that the other way around. Yeah. I would say for me, the balance. There's the balance between truth and grace. I would like to apologize for. In the early days, too much truth that I don't even agree with at this point in my life. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like the dogmatism of, this is thus saith the Lord. And then probably there were times when I needed to do more truth and in an effort to reach the ones that were the farthest away. Mm-hmm. I was too much on the grace side. Mm-hmm. But especially those early years with the truth. I mean, when I look back at some of the stuff that I preached about and that I really believed that, was just a part of my background and my training and, my dogmatism from back in the day, I unnecessarily added things to people. I was a Pharisee. Mm-hmm. I guess, that's the bottom line.
Yeah. You go to the old sermon file and you pull it out and you open it up and go, surely I did not preach this.
Exactly right, surely, Mike. Oh, my gosh.
I've never found one I like. Maybe two or three.
And then you call up and say, make sure this was not on the web anywhere. Right. Yeah. Get this out of here.
Set this thing on fire. Yeah. Destroy this evidence, Lord.
Yep.
When you're talking about that, Tim, triggered my mind. I had been at this church in Emmanuel for a number of years, and I forget, I was probably away working on a D-Min course or something, I don't know about, come back, and I was really convicted about, the idea that, do these people know that I love them? Mm-hmm. And your truth and grace kind of triggered this, and I remember standing in the pulpit, and it was extemporaneous, and I paused and said, you're good people, and I do love you.
Yeah.
And I had a worship music minister, Bob Welch. He's a wonderful man, tough guy, wonderful man, good leader. He didn't spread compliments. He came up to me after service, goes, let's say I've been there 5 or 6 years. He said, that's the first time I've ever heard you say that.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. We started ending Kairos, and it was one of those things, just we needed to wrap the service up. I need to say something.
Which was a midweek young adult oriented service.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And so I just sat on the stool and I said, hey, listen, if you haven't heard it from anybody else, hear it from us. We love you. You matter to us. It makes a difference what happens in your life. It makes a difference to us. And that was all I said.
Yeah.
Hey, good close to the service. Nice way to wrap it up. The times people came up to me and said,
yeah.
First time I heard it,
the first time I've heard that. Or the next time, 2 or 3 times when I didn't do it, I ended the service. The guy came up and said, you didn't tell us you loved us tonight.
That's how desperate we all are.
Well, and you've done this like I have. I mean, I've stood in pulpits and conferences, and I've harped this, goes, Christ loves you.
Yeah.
And pause dramatically.
Yeah.
And people are just like I am.
Yeah.
Where does that come from?
We're all deeply insecure, my friends.
And lonely.
And lonely.
And we all got this thing, if you really knew me, Tim, you wouldn't.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
If you really knew me.
Yeah. I think that's where judgmentalism
is probably true.
Well, you guys, I tell people, I said, the AA meeting I go to has nothing to do with alcohol.
I have a friend that was a president of a very prestigious Christian university, and he went through, like a lot of us, hard stuff and was let go. And he had been discipling a guy that he'd led to Christ who was in AA. And after a period, he said, would you be my sponsor? And this guy is nationally renowned.
Yeah.
And he thought time and involvement. Well, he said yes.
Yeah.
And I bet he's told me 10 times, he goes, Michael, I found more acceptance and more love at an AA meeting than I ever found
church better than anybody.
Ministry in the world.
Yeah.
And I thought, what an indictment.
Mm-hmm.
And go back to disciple making.
Oh, yeah.
What is that? I mean, that's what they do.
Yeah.
Well, that was the old Cheers song, right?
Yeah.
Everybody knows your name.
Norm.
With that.
Everybody needs a place where they can be Norm.
Yeah.
Wow, there's like half the crowd doesn't even understand this.
Right.
Sorry, guys.
Like the night of Kairos, I told a MASH story. And it was just zoom.
That's why I finally retired. I'm like, I kept talking about the Doobie Brothers.
Yeah, all my stories they're too old.
I got to get current.
Next question.
All right.
What was the moment that made you glad you were called?
The moment that made you glad you were called.
It would have been every baptism weekend.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we did baptisms all the time, but we started getting to the point where we would have a massive baptism weekend, and I would go home and of course maybe I shouldn't have been in the tub. I mean, we had multiple campuses at different points, and it wasn't just me, but man, I always wanted to be in the tub. I always wanted to be there. And I'd go home and, like I'd have a crick in my, in my back. And I had a guy, a donor that gave a big check for a building campaign. And every time we had a baptism service, he would say, that was another dividend check for me.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
And I think that was, that's what it was for me. It was like watching these people come up out of the waters of baptism and, and seeing the change every time.
Gosh. How about you? Because you said from like 12 on, you knew you were going to be a pastor.
Yeah. I've always known. There are a bunch. People say, I wouldn't do what you do. And I just shrug and say, you don't see what I see. And the number of times I have seen, the line I use is, our God is so good and so strong and so creative. He can take the worst moment of your life and make it the first line of your testimony. Mm-hmm. So the people that have come into my office go, please, God, don't tell anybody this, but this is what I did, and I'm so ashamed, please. Yeah. And Jesus does what Jesus does. And they'll say, hey, I'm giving my testimony to my group. Will you come? Yeah. And I'll sit in the back and dad burn if they don't stand up and go, you guys don't know this, but and I'm going, I've been bleeding biting my lip, not telling anybody what's going on. And here you are, and you make it the first line of your testimony. A woman had an affair. She was going to tell her husband, so she said, I want to tell him in your office. Mm-hmm. Because I don't know how he'll react. I said, okay. And she tells him. And this is a big man. And you remember the cartoons where the sword cuts the guy into cubes and he just falls into cubes? Yeah. That's literally what happened to this man. I saw him fall in pieces just on the floor. Yeah. To the point where he's on all fours. Oh, man. Grabbing, pulling the carpet up.
Gut shot.
And just slaughter and tears and just, And all of a sudden, and it was just that fast, I see him stiffen. And he bang. And that rascal sits on that couch next to her and holds her hands. And he says, I'm sorry. I am sorry that you felt you had to go somewhere else.
He owned it.
For the love I have for you, I am so sorry. And he turned to me and he said, Mike, this is not God's will for my life or my family. What do we do now?
I think I'll step out.
No. There's something going on here. I don't have anything to do with it.
Let you sort it out.
Yeah.
I'm not worthy.
Amazing stories. Started working with a little guy, and he was mid 16, 17, trying to get his life together, figure out who he was, did a little stupid stuff. So I was working with him, and Alex, you got a Bible? Yeah, got a Bible. What kind is it, Alex? It's a holy Bible. It says,
As opposed to.
Well, it says it right on the front of the Holy Bible, Mike. I said, okay, let's work on this. Well, Alex makes a commitment to Christ. He gets saved. And the change that happens in this guy's life, his friend comes to me and says, you need to talk to Alex. About what? He said, he's at my house 10:30 every Sunday morning blowing the horn down in the front yard, yelling to me to get up so we can go to church. I said, yeah, I'll talk to him. I said, Sunday school starts at 10.
You're late. You're late.
He needs to get you here earlier. Yeah. Those are the stories.
Yeah.
That,
I agree.
When people say,
when you see a funeral, when you do a funeral, for someone that was taken too soon, and you see God show up in that family and the people around, and it's going to be okay, even though it's just devastating. Any of those times when you got to see the Lord work, not through you at all, just got to see Jesus show up for people.
So I call it a sanctified voyeurism. That you get to see things
perfect.
No one else is supposed to
perfect.
see.
That's and one of the.
You feel like is it Revelation 3? It says, I fell on my face like a dead man. Like, what am I doing? When that happens in your office, what am I doing?
You just want to back away.
I think it was E.M. Bound's either Power of Prayer or Purpose of Prayer, the little flip book.
Yeah,
he told a story about a guy named Will Sangster. I think Sanger. Methodist pastor?
Sanger, I think.
And, was he the one that wore grooves in the wood floor by his desk where he prayed so often with his knees? And he writes, the other pastor says, I was afraid to open my eyes when he prayed lest I see the face of God. And,
Sigurd Bryant was that way. He was a professor of religion at Stanford University. And the first question on his test was, did you do the reading 30 points? and people would say, well, I did 50, I did half of it, I did whatever. And some people would write yes and then go back and tell him,
I really didn't,
Because the joke was, if you cheat on the test, Jesus would tell Dr. Bryant. but when he prayed, it was that way. I'm not going to open my eyes because I will see more than I ought to see in the holiness of God and all that. So
I don't know how to answer that question. I mean, it's a great thought process, but I'm kind of at a loss because I think there was always this incalculable. I didn't get a call. I never had a call. To me, it was indeterminate. To me, it was gifting, skill. Someone once said, to be a pastor, you have to love study. You have to love the Bible, which I did. I think affirmation from mentors probably is the closest thing, which is that's not a specific, Mike, but I think it's the closest thing. And I had a problem of assembling kind of a pantheon of mentors that I wanted their approval, whether it was Floyd Sharp or Howard Hendricks or a number of other people. And then one was a surgeon in Nacogdoches, Texas, who was the most winsome Christian I ever met. And I wanted to be like these guys in their field of expertise and gifting, and to realize, no, you're not Floyd or Prof or Rick or you're Michael Easley. That's who I made you to be. But I needed those voices to say, yeah, you could be a pastor. You can teach the word. God's going to use you. And that's our own insecurities. I mean, flip around. Am I supposed to be doing this? To me, it was terrifying to hold the Bible in front of a room of people. Yeah. Terrifying. Yeah. Thus says the Lord.
Right. Yeah, no, I know.
Terrifying. That to this day haunts me when I go somewhere. And it's not butterflies. It's a holy terror.
That's great.
You're going to say something, and they're going to believe it.
Right. And go act on it.
Yeah.
But I think summarily it was when, first time I ever preached at Swindoll's church, he would take weeks off in the summer. He asked me years ago, and I would go to Dallas and preach for him. And here in the audience were three of my professors.
Yeah. Wow.
Didn't matter that the room was full of thousands of people. Yeah. All I saw was Stan Toussaint, Howard Hendricks, and John Hand. I'm like, are you kidding me?
Oh, Lord.
And Stan Toussaint, bless his heart, came down. He was a fabulous instructor. And he said, that was a great sermon, Michael.
Yeah.
I don't care about the rest of them.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times in my prayers, my first prayer would be, Jesus, I think you made a mistake.
I know.
I'm not mad, but I just think we just need to own up that this is not working out. And I think you'll be happier. I think the church. I think everybody this is okay. I mean,
it didn't work out pretty well.
It just didn't work out.
It didn't work out pretty well.
That's
all I can say.
That's good. Didn't work out pretty well.
What's your trophy?
My trophy?
Your trophy.
Expand on that a little bit. You're killing me.
I got one.
Okay.
I have the plaque that was on the communion table of the church that I went to in 1990. This do in remembrance of me. I still have it in my little office. It's right there looking at me, and it to me represents. There was a 40-year history before I got to this. Is a turnaround church. There's a 40-year history of faithful, sometimes knucklehead Christians that did what Jesus wanted them to do to the best of their ability, and then they called me in, and I did. I transitioned it into a church that I think was what God wanted it to be. And, and I got to do that for 33 years altogether. But for me, it's a foundation, because when we get to heaven, there's going to be, so many stories. I mean, it's not going to be, the Swindells and the Billy Grahams and all those peoples that we're going to want to be necessarily going up and talking to. It's going to be those faithful guys in that small town. It's going to, it's going to be the minor prophets, not the major prophets. It's going to be those people that were faithful. And so for me, what that symbolizes for me is just all those good people. One guy who just passed away just recently was Jim Atkins, and he was one of the guys who built that building in like 76 or something like that. I mean, he didn't have the spiritual gift of doing a lot of teaching or any of those kinds of things, but he could show up on his time off and help build that building that was the foundation for what became what is now that church. That's a trophy for me.
You're killing me, Smalls.
I don't know if the church knows that I stole it, but, it's mine now.
I don't know, honestly. I have one. What's yours? That'll give me some ideas.
Well, when people ask me, what are you proudest of? My first question is that both my sons and their families are still in the faith.
Yeah.
And they have found their own path in that. Both are engaged and will text me, hey, I read this, or what are you thinking about this?
Wow.
The story parallel to yours is in the platform of the pulpit at Brentwood Baptist Church, there is a Bible in the foundation. And it is literally in the concrete. And to remind whoever comes behind me, you are literally standing on the Word.
Was it a Holy Bible?
Yes, a Holy Bible. And of course, at Brentwood, a guy said, hey, I'll build the box. Of course, there are people who paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for a coffin that doesn't look as good as this. It's lined and water sealed and engraved
but it's in concrete.
Yeah. But the day we put it in, we told the builders what we wanted to do, and the concrete guy said, okay, he said, you'll have about 15 minutes notice when I start pouring this concrete. So he called me and said, hey, today I'm going to be doing that. So we ran over there and we've got the box. And he shows us where, and I can show you where the Bible is when we're on the platform. So we pull up the rebar and slide that Bible in that rebar and place it down in there. We're all standing there. This guy, tattooed, long ponytail, he's throwing that concrete, pumping that concrete, comes to the Bible, takes his hat off and puts it over his heart.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
And puts it back.
That's awesome.
So from now on, anytime you're in the pulpit, you're standing on the Bible that I put there.
Yeah, that's great.
That's a fun story.
It's not a time capsule, though. It's in the rebar in the grocery.
It's there. In there.
It's there. So when the earthquake happens and it ruptures open.
That'll be one of the signs
Jimmy
of Christ's
Hoffa
return.
and the Bible.
Jimmy Hoffa's holding the Bible. And Elvis comes along. That's a great thought. I had, my mind shot. First thing that comes to mind are a couple of these couples that are doing ministry.
Right. Yeah.
There you go.
There you go.
There's
exactly right.
There's a couple in Richmond area, and they come to a pilgrimage to see us every year. And
to Mecca.
they write down questions on. She's a delightful couple, and he's an elder, and he's a civil engineer, and she's a professional musician, and they don't want to talk about that. They want to talk about ministry. Mm-hmm. And they were counseling a lot of couples, and so they started taking counseling courses on the side so they could be better counselors. Yeah. He's working in the church, and there's single moms, and he says, I could probably start fixing cars. He's an engineer. Yeah. He gets all the tools. He's buying old junker cars, fixing them up, and giving them away. I mean, they're doing more ministry than most full-time staff.
Right.
Yeah.
And I go, we'll see them this summer again. They'll come visit us, and they're blown away. Like I say, you'd have been this way whether Cindy and I had to come along or not. No. Yeah. So in a open-handed way, that's the couple we bless God for. And there's several like that. We just say, God, we got to cross
got some too.
life with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't have a plaque though.
Yeah. I can go to a Baptist church and steal you one.
Get one. I do have a couple flags that were flown over the Capitol and flown over Afghanistan. Those are, I guess, trophies.
Thanks for joining us, and we hope our conversation and our honesty and our friendship has encouraged you today. We really want that to happen. And listen, while you're watching, let me remind you of a couple of things. One, Jesus is faithful. All of us have stories where we were exhausted, empty, and Jesus was faithful. Mm-hmm. Secondly, you don't make it by yourself. Life's too hard. Mm-hmm. Sooner or later, it will ambush you. And when it does, you better have a band of brothers that you can call and who will answer the phone. Where are you? And I'll be there. Yeah. These are these kind of guys for me. And you have to have that band of brothers around you, or you just won't make it. Life's too hard. No. So be encouraged. Find your group of buddies. Start drinking some coffee. Maybe smoke a good cigar and a nice round table. And we'll see you next time.